Hey guys, my name is RyanCentral and welcome to HitScan. The patch notes are out. All of the changes that we've been hinted at over the past couple of days are now coming to fruition, which do include a nerf to Reyna, interestingly enough. Sorry this video is a little bit late as well in regards to other stuff. I think I got the timings wrong for when the patch notes were meant to be hit, but it does give us a better look, I suppose, at stuff like the Korean gameplay that shows off some of these changes in a bit more detail. But before we go over the changes to Reyna and Yoru, let's actually talk about the weapon changes, as there's a couple more, most of which people know about, so we can kind of gloss over this very quickly. The first one is to do with the Marshal. The movement speed when zoomed is now at 90% of unzoomed movement speed, so basically you can move faster when you are scoped into the Marshal than you could before. The price has also been decreased to 1,000 credits, like a lot of people saw from the skins video. Speaking of which, thank you for watching those videos. Because of those two, we had the most popular day of views ever in our 5-year history for you guys watching those videos, so thank you very much for that. But yeah, the price decrease has gone down to 1,000, and also you get to see a bit more of the magnification at a 3.5 times scaling. We can talk about that in a second, but I do want to go over the other weapons because I do feel that they all come together pretty nicely in that regard. Stinger, the price has been increased. They've basically swapped with a Marshal. Now that's 1,100 credits instead of 1,000. The full auto fire rate has been reduced from 18 to 16, so it fires a little bit slower, not really too much that you're going to notice, and it now reaches the maximum spread of bloom where the bullets start to go a bit more crazy at bullet number 4 instead of bullet number 6. So if you hold down the left click, you are going to have a much wider spread of gunshots very much earlier on in the cycle than before, but again, not really by much, let's be honest. And also adjusted pitch, the vertical recoil curve for full auto climbs more aggressively past the third bullet, so again, the spread on this gun is going to be a lot more crazy in that factor. We can maybe have a look at what the devs say in a second. And finally, for the Stinger, when it comes to the burst fire, adjusted pitch to make it more aggressive, much like before, and improved recovery time on the burst fire from 0.45 to 0.4. These are smaller things, but they're still worth noting if you do use these weapons quite a lot. And then the Frenzy, the price has been increased from 400 to 500, and that's been the only change. What I'm surprised at is the range of these guns haven't been changed at all. We went over what Niku said about running and gunning as well, because these guns are, you know, full fire SMGs, the Frenzy if you want to count it that way as well, but of course the Stinger, they should be good in more of a running and gunning capacity, but they have been nerfed. They are a little bit worse at doing that, but not to the point that you can't do those things with those guns anymore. They need to be good in those areas, otherwise what's the point in using them? On that subject, that's why I really like the Marshal buff, because if you have a long range weapon, you're going to be able to gun down somebody that's just running at you with a Frenzy from distance, right? So it does add a bit more of the long scale gameplay in there. Again, with the weapons, I only really wanted to touch on this because most people knew that these changes were coming. Certainly to the Frenzy, we knew that it was getting a price upgrade, but it is interesting to note that not else is coming. The most controversial change, I personally think, is the nerf to Reyna. In short, the maximum amount of devour or dismiss charges that you could have before was 4. It's now been halved. You can only have 2 at most, and those charges cost a little bit more as well. They used to be 100 credits, they're now 200 credits. The buff is an interesting one though. Slaying enemies that Reyna has damaged in the last 3 seconds now drops soul orbs, even if Reyna doesn't land the killing shot. Beforehand, you could do 150 damage to an opponent, but if you didn't get the killing blow, you wouldn't get a soul orb. You couldn't use your utility, even if you did the majority of damage onto that player. Now that's no longer the case. I think that's nice. I personally don't think Reyna needed nerfing, but I don't think that this nerf is that bad. Realistically, how many times have you used 3 or 4 dismisses or devours in a round? More often you use a couple at most, so I really do think that it stops Reyna from just being a smurfing one-man show where you could just run away with a round. At some point that utility has to run out. Nobody else has 4 charges of anything, you know what I mean? So I do understand that in some retrospect, but I liked where Reyna was at. She's always going to be used in rank. She is a solo queue queen because that's her whole identity. That's what she's meant to be good at. And even in the pro scene, her pick rate's comfortable, right? Some players do one trick her, sure, but many players one trick Omen or Cypher. Like, what's the deal there? But I also do think that it's very map dependent. She's very good on Ascent or even Haven, for example. She's not good all of the time, which I think makes her a good candidate for being picked up. I think the duelists right now, other than Yoru, are in a pretty decent spot with their pick rate and how often they're chosen. Certainly when you look at the top tier in the pro scene, which really at this point is all we can look at, right? But the devs do say that the Reyna gets a dual nerf and a buff in hopes of reining in some of her pub stop potential, while still keeping a viable, imbalanced and coordinated play. The change reduction should limit how much impact she can have round over round when she's heavily outgunning her opponent, but allows enough room for the 1v5 dream when Empress is active. Bear in mind that Empress still works in the same way. The Empress is still a strong ultimate, it still retains some of that impact, even though it really doesn't feel that strong in some cases. It's still pretty good, and that in itself doesn't get nerfed, which I think is nice. The price increase for Devour and Dismiss is in tandem with the Frenzy price increase as well, so it should also push some tougher economic decisions during pistol round. She'll no longer be able to buy a Charge of Leer, a Soul Orb ability, and then upgrade a pistol, so it keeps it cheap. On the flip side, Reyna getting Soul Orbs from recently damaged enemies should help her reliability when playing around teammates, and reduce the animosity when an ally lands a killing blow, and Reyna goes empty-handed. Again, I don't feel that some of this stuff was necessary, but we'll move on to Yoru, as he's had a couple of buffs, and there is one that's actually in the bug fixes, which I think counts as a buff as well. In short, Gate Crash now displays the range at which the tether can be seen by enemies while moving on the minimap, but also it shows the audio area that it can be heard on the minimap. So you have a lot more information on where Gate Crash could be heard, which I think is a really impactful change. When me and Miska were playtesting and myth busting a lot of Yoru's stuff, it took us a while to work out the range of how far away you need to be to actually hear the Gate Crash. I still think the radius is quite large, it could be brought in a little bit, but now that you have clear indication on where you can teleport to when you have typical default spots that the enemy team could be stood in, you can now work out where you can teleport to without potentially being caught out. It's the same with Omen's teleport ultimate, right, from the shadows. You still have that indication of where you can be heard from. It helps you place your utility better, and I think that's what's going to happen here with Gate Crash. Not the biggest buff in the world, but still a nice quality of life thing. And then Dimensional Drift, you can now see the minimap beforehand. It was warped by everything, which I think was something that people didn't really clock onto at that point. Enemies within Yoru's vision range while in Dimensional Drift, and now reveal 2 allies in the minimap as well, so it's good at scouting out information where people are playing from, which I really like. And Dimensional Drift can no longer body block enemies, which is something that we saw a little bit before, having people die to the spike and other forms of utility. So a bit of a nerf in some capacity, but not by much. They do say that we are investigating future changes to Yoru that target his power and ability to achieve his core promise. These changes ensure a more quality of life, and they would improve his use today. Gate Crash wasn't providing much information when enemies could see or hear his teleport fragment, so we added a few pieces to make that easier. And the ultimate, we noticed a burden on Yoru having to communicate threats between his allies and his destination, so this should make it easier to communicate where people are playing from, etc, etc. It's just straightforward stuff. There were also some changes to Brimstone and Phoenix with the Hot Hands and Molotov, where the audio can be heard much easier when other actions and sounds occur nearby, because beforehand they would kind of fall to the wayside and you couldn't hear that there was a Molotov down or a Hot Hands. That's all of the changes in regards to that, not too much, but one thing that I did want to highlight with the bugs is fixed an issue where Yoru's decoy has a slightly different sounding footstep than Yoru himself. We obviously went over this interaction in our myth busting video a couple of weeks ago now, over a month now. Crazy how quickly this year is going, where we highlighted that the decoy sound very clean. There's no squelching, I suppose. It doesn't sound natural. Therefore, it's very easy to tell they're fake footsteps. That's just a decoy ability. Now they should sound like normal footsteps, which is really good. And this should help Yoru's decoy ability quite a lot, and it will make it very difficult to realize whether these are decoy steps or whether they are genuinely people running, for example. So whilst it's in the bug fixes and it's more of a quality of life change that wasn't intentional, it's still a big change to Yoru in the line, but it feels obvious that more stuff is going to come. Finally, we have the stuff that was said about the new escalation game mode. That's coming out in this patch as well. I won't go over it too much because all of this information came out yesterday, and to be honest, we were more focusing on the stuff to do with the skins, right? Because that was when the embargo came out for that. But generally, it is a gun game team deathmatch game mode where you will have different weapons, bits of utility that you need to land kills with, but you need to get 7 points, I think, for the whole team. There's a bit of gameplay on in the background, and I don't want to focus on the game mode because most of you have seen this. If you haven't, I'll link all of the stuff talking about it in the description below. But I do want to say, before we get too long in the tooth on this video, I think that we might be seeing a map at the start of Act 2, and the reason is Act 2 for Episode 2 starts in 2 weeks' time. The next patch cycle will have the new agent coming into the game, with all of the new stuff, the new battle pass, all that jazz. Why did they not put this game mode in with Act 2? You know, it could be like, oh, we have new skins, the new battle pass, we have a new agent, and we also have a new game mode, escalation protocol. I think they put this in now because there's bigger stuff coming in Act 2. I don't know what it could be. My first guess would be a potential other map. I think it's a bit soon, perhaps, but considering Riot have said multiple times that they want to get these maps out as soon as possible, it would not surprise me in the slightest if we are going to get map number 6 added into the game at this point. There's been teases of stuff potentially with some of the stuff in the battle pass, so maybe we can get a new map that's based around this image in particular. Who knows at this point? But I do find it really weird the timing of this game mode being added in at the end of Act 1 instead of the start of Act 2. I'm curious of what you guys think, but genuinely, this doesn't make much sense to me. Why not put this in at the start of Act 2? We can wait 2 weeks for a new game mode, right? So I do think there's going to be some more big stuff coming, other than a new agent, because we always get a new agent at the start of an Act 2. And so yeah, I'm curious of what you guys think, because genuinely it doesn't make much sense to me at all. But these are all of the patch note changes. Again, I just want to gloss over it because usually we get these like an hour early and we can kind of go over the changes, get the video prepped and put it out as soon as the patch is revealed. But this time I was a little bit late because of all of the stuff happening with the skins and all that jazz. But yeah, buffs to Yoru are nice. The nerfs to Reyna are unnecessary but not too damaging. But I'll be interested to see how the pro players really interact with her in the future, whether they stop playing her, whether they play her the same amount. Could go either way, to be honest. But the stinger nerfs, the frenzy nerfs, and the martial buffs are going to be super interesting. I don't think it's going to change all that much, but it's just going to make life a bit easier on players running into these kind of guns, right? And the escalation game mode looks like a lot of fun. There's also some competitive changes to do with AFKing, and obviously there was a big post about some of the stuff they're doing about toxic people in the future. But yeah, I feel that this is straightforward stuff. There's not too much more in the patch notes to highlight, so we'll leave it there. We've done 4 videos in the last 3 days, so I'm going to try and take it easy from now. So thanks for watching, thanks for all of the support over the past couple of days, it's meant a ton, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care, I'll see you then.